Hello, kitties. It's your favorite homosexual clown of an obscure origin, Dick the Clown, and today I am going to explain the reasons why my brother Ronald McDonald, also known as the Penis Clown, and myself did not star in the 90s Nicktoon Angry Beavers. I remember it well. Back in the 90s I was in a rough spot, as the Barney Lunch hadn't been formed yet. Drew Pickles was working on Rugrats and shooting gay porn on the side. Barney had his own show, and Ronald was already seeing success as a McDonald's mascot, whereas I was completely unknown to everybody. I was rather down on my luck and was eating a bum sleeping at Ronald's place, though it wasn't all bad, as it gave us plenty of time to have gay sex. We even filmed some amateur home-made incest gay sex videos and uploaded them to the internet, which was still very young at the time, so their quality was pretty low, but still enough for anyone even remotely swell to masturbate to. Unfortunately, the sites I uploaded them to are all defunct, so they seem to be lost to time, but I digress. My luck would soon change, however, when Nickelodeon approached my brother and I, asking if we would be interested in starring in the new Nicktoon they were working on. We were both quite surprised, as at the time literally nobody knew who I was, and Ronald had only ever starred in fast food commercials prior, but we were interested so we asked what it was about. They proceeded to explain the premise of the show, that it would be about two clowns, who were brothers and got into all sorts of swell shenanigans and general cartoon stuff, with a few subtle adult references thrown in for good measure, though not nearly as much as Rocco's Modern Life. They continued to explain that they were looking for clowns who were actual brothers, because they felt it would add to the authenticity of the interactions. Ronald and myself were both quite excited at the prospect of starring in a cartoon, so we agreed. As development started, the creators explained that because they were not actually clown brothers themselves, they would need our input on authenticity while keeping it humorous. Of course, as you may expect, Ronald and myself had many swell ideas for the show to keep things in line with our relationship. I'll tell you all both some of our ideas, as well as some of the things that just changed over the course of development. In the final release of the show, the two brothers Daggett and Norbert lived together in a beaver house on a lake in the woods. However, the original concept was much more swell, being that we lived in a big top tent in the middle of San Francisco. Each episode would focus on us having some sort of argument, not unlike the finished version, then we would go out and do things around the city. Originally, the writers were mostly at a loose as to what we should do, floating ideas such as us going to the park and causing trouble and other such things. Ronald had a few ideas for episode settings, however, which included, but is not limited to, visiting gay bars, visiting the homeless area, visiting the ghetto, among others. Each time some sort of conflict starting, where myself and Ronald argue over things but eventually overcome the challenge and make up, in the end. In the normal show, in some episodes the Beavers leave the woods and visit other places. This is actually based off the original concept, where we would leave San Francisco and visit other places, which also included the woods, where Ronald and myself would have a massive orgy, with all the poopy queer animals there, although the creators said that idea was way too adult and they were going for subtle adult humor. Of course, while disappointing, this was understandable. This brings back memories of when the writers were trying to think up names for the clowns, as they had no intention of using the names Richard and Ronald. I suggested to the writers they should name them Faggot and Ass-Butt. The writers laughed and thought it was funny, though they said they would not be able to have those names, but the suggestion inspired them to make the names Daggett and Norbert. Another suggestion of mine that didn't make it into the final show was that the show should include guest stars from other shows such as Barney and Drew Pickles. The writers said that they could not use intellectual property not owned by Viacom, but that they might be able to have characters from other Nickelodeon shows make cameos, which of course meant Drew Pickles wasn't ruled out. Though they ended up scrapping this idea by the time the actual show was being developed, sadly. Another idea of mine that surprisingly made it into the show was to have myself and Ronald be into old cheesy monster movies from the 1950s and base some episodes around that. There were of course more minor ideas that were floated around, but those are the ones that stand out to me. Maybe if you asked Ronald he may mention different things, but anyway. After all of those swell ideas were ironed out, it seemed like the show was good to go, but in the end we eventually would not be able to sign a contract. You may be wondering why we quit the show despite the plan seemingly going smoothly. Well, there were two issues. The first was that Skank Tree Flower, who was eventually written in to the show to be my love interest. The idea of having a love interest with a female, even just an on-screen female, was unbearable to a flaming homo such as myself. I recommended to the writers that it would be much more swell if Ronald and myself actually had a love interest, telling them that incest is wincest, and since Ronald and I have poopy gay let sex all the time, it would be extremely authentic, which is what the writers said they were going for. They called me a disgusting sick fuck and fired me on the spot, though they were still open to Ronald being on the show and considered finding another clown to play his on-screen brother. However, this plan also fell flat when Nickelodeon couldn't come to a licensing agreement with McDonald's, and as such Ronald was also dropped. After that they rewrote the show to be about two Beavers, who were brothers instead. In spite of Tree Flower, the show still ended up pretty swell in the end, and I would often masturbate to it when it came on, especially the episode where the Beavers must fall over everything. So that about wraps it up, the story of how Ronald and myself almost starred in what would become the Angry Beavers. Until next time, kiddies.